For decades, Cesar Chavez was treated like a saint. His name on schools, his face on murals, his legacy untouchable. But what if the truth was never missing? What if it was buried, protected, excused, hidden in plain sight? Because now the stories are coming out. And what we're seeing isn't just the fall of a man, it's the collapse of a system that allowed power to operate without consequence. And this time people aren't protecting the icon, they're exposing the truth and they're demanding accountability. So join me today as we examine the truth behind an icon, Cesar Chavez. What it do, fame, family, what it do. Not gonna do the horns today. I'm not gonna start off like I usually do. I think today's topic is a bit sensitive, but nonetheless, I am a huge believer of discussing even the difficult topics. And I do believe that the discussions generated around sensitive topics like this do bring awareness, and hopefully we can avoid things like this from happening in the future. Let's jump into this because today we're diving into something that's not easy to talk about, but it's necessary. So we're talking about Cesar Chavez.
Cesar Estrada Chavez was an American civil rights activist and labor leader who was born in Yuma, Arizona. The Chavez family became migrant farm workers, and to help support his family, Cesar dropped out of school at the 8th grade to work in the fields of the San Joaquin Valley, soon becoming a grassroots leader for a Latino civil rights group. A short time later, Cesar stepped up his activism by forming the National Farm Workers Organization in conjunction with Dolores Huerta, now known as the United Farm Workers of America, whose original goal was to organize farm workers for better pay and better working conditions. Cesar believed passionately that the movement he founded had to be more than a union that worked solely to improve wages, hours, and working conditions. Most farm workers were poor, leaving them little access to good housing, healthcare, or education. And to achieve improvements in these areas, Chavez was adamant about using nonviolent tactics as a means of negotiation with corporate farm owners. In later years, Cesar's commitment to social justice went far beyond the farm worker, when in the 1960s he became a strong opponent to the Vietnam War, while in the 1970s he became an early and quite vocal supporter of gay rights, which in many instances didn't sit well with his original farm worker constituency.
This question of the illegals I find very interesting. Would you say that it's, at this particular moment, as important as any of the other problems facing the union?
Oh, yes. In the last 3 weeks, it has become an emergency for us. Well, there's an awful lot of illegals coming in. By the hundred, by the thousands, our people are not only in some of the crews where there is now strike breaking, some of those crews are 100% illegals. Outright, openly, with no attempt to disguise it. And so it's so bad now that we estimate 60 to 70% of the farm workers in California, of the resident worker, of the citizen, is out of a job because of the wetback fix.
Wait, what?
Coming in by the thousands, just unbelievable. See, they're coming in with the consent of the Immigration Service, which is part of the Department of Justice. How else could they come? We, for instance, know that if you go to Coachella, you go to around the El Paso area, the secondary immigration checkpoints have been unmanned now for at least 3-4 weeks. They're closed. They're at night. They're dark. There aren't any patrolmen there. It's a gimmick. We think that it's a prelude at the beginning to a big drive on the part of the administration and the Mexican government to bring the Bracero program again. It's a vicious attack on the on the local worker, and it's just one of those things that agribusiness thinks they can get away with it. And our job is to inform the whole country what's happening, together with a boycott, and together with a boycott, and
there you have it, the life and activism of Cesar Chavez.
Not the version you learned in school, not the polished symbol, but the man behind the movement and the system that allowed him to operate unchecked. And more importantly, why the response today is sending a message that goes way beyond Chavez himself. Cesar Chavez didn't just rise to prominence. He was built into something bigger than human. A symbol of resistance, a face of farm worker justice, a rallying point for an entire movement. And yes, the movement mattered. Farm workers were being exploited, underpaid, ignored, and Chavez became the figure people rallied behind. But here's where things take a turn, because while the public saw a leader, internally power was consolidating. The movement became centralized around him. Decisions flowed through him. Loyalty was expected, not questioned. And when a movement starts revolving around one person, that's not leadership anymore. It becomes control. Now, let's talk about what power looked like behind the scenes. Because this wasn't just influence. This was authority over people's lives. We're talking about a structure where Chavez controlled access to opportunity. He controlled people's positions within the union, and he had the ability to elevate or remove individuals at will. And when you combine that kind of power with the culture that discourages questioning, you create the perfect environment for abuse. Now, according to multiple reports and testimonies, women within the movement weren't just colleagues. They were vulnerable to a man who held influence over their careers, their families, their place in something bigger than themselves. And that power was allegedly used to exploit. Not once, not in isolation, but repeatedly. We're talking about accusations of sexual assault, coercion, long-term abuse, and even abuse involving minors connected to the movement. This wasn't random. This was proximity. This was access. This was a system where the closer you were to power, the more exposed you became to it. And now here's the part people need to really understand. The silence wasn't a mystery. It was engineered. Inside the movement, there was an unspoken rule. You don't speak against Chavez. Not because people didn't see things, but because speaking out came with consequences. People were removed from the union, pushed out, silenced. Internal purges weren't rumors. They were part of maintaining control. So imagine being a victim, knowing what happened to you, but also knowing that speaking up could destroy your role in the movement, your ability to support your family, the very cause you believe. So people stayed quiet, not because nothing happened, but because everything was at stake. And over time, that silence became a shield, not for the victims, but for the man in power. But silence doesn't last forever. Eventually, truth finds its way through.
Now, speaking with us in an ABC News Network exclusive, Dolores Huerta says as an adult, she was sexually assaulted by movement co-founder Cesar Chavez. Ana Murguia telling the New York Times she was 13 years old when Cesar Chavez started to sexually abuse her. Deborah Rojas telling the Times she was raped by Chavez when she was 15. Dolores Huerta holding her own painful secret for nearly 60 years. Inspired to speak out now because of the revelation from these two women who are now in their 60s. How would you describe what you've been through the last few weeks?
Pretty devastating. It's pretty devastating because to think that someone that so many of us thought as our hero.
You didn't know about these other women?
No, and you always have a little suspicion there, you know what I mean? But no, I didn't know.
Tell me about your concern for these other women, young women.
That is a major concern, to think that this is happening and this is so prevalent, and that in our society that this evil exists, and it's so widespread, and something that really needs to be addressed, And it's that people don't talk about it because, I think it's too shameful, I think, for women. And God knows that we've got to do more to protect women and girls, especially girls, But we're supposed to be an advanced society, but yet the way that we treat women, you know, it's so wrong.
Why have you chosen to speak up now?
Oh, because the New York Times story came out, and for all of the years that I spent organizing the Farmworker movement, that I had even started organizing farm workers before Cesar and I started to form the union under the other organization that we belong to, and so this is out, and so it's time for me to tell my secret also.
You have said the knowledge that Cesar hurt young girls sickens me. It makes you sick.
Oh, I think it's even more than sick. It's devastating. Cesar spoke about and practiced the nonviolent movement, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what could be more violent than that, And to think that somebody that we look to as our hero and our leader, it's pretty horrible.
How would you characterize what he allegedly did to Ana Murgia and Deborah Rojas?
I would say horrible. It's horrible. Because God knows what they've suffered because of that,
Can you tell me about that winter night in 1966 in Delano?
It was something unexpected, He said, we have to talk. I thought we were going to a meeting or something, and no, it wasn't. He had other intentions,
You said you were surprised at the brutality of it?
Well, I believe that when you do these kinds of actions against women, it is a violence, and I think these are brutal acts.
It had happened before in a hotel room. What do you remember about that?
Again, it was uninvited, unexpected.
It pains me to have to ask you this, but did Cesar Chavez rape you?
What one could, you were forced into a situation of unwanted sex or whatever, that I think you could, you could consider it rape.
And you didn't tell anyone? Why
No.
not? Why not?
I've spent my entire life organizing for farm workers, okay? I didn't want to do anything. And I knew Cesar was probably the only person that I had ever met that could really do the job to organize workers.
So you did not want to hurt the movement?
No, I mean...
So the damage of speaking up would be too much? It would hurt the movement too much?
Oh, absolutely.
But what about the damage that had been done to you? You set it aside?
Well, I had been to similar violent relationships with my ex-husbands, so, and I think that's the big problem, is that women are, not seen as human beings.
And in your case, those two sexual assaults, you became pregnant?
Yes.
Both times?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was when abortion wasn't legal, and myself as a Catholic, at that time, I, as a good Catholic, thought that birth control was a sin. I thought that abortion was a sin. I have since changed my mind on those issues, and because I now realize that women have a right to abortion. And by the way, also, abortion was illegal at that time also.
So you hid the pregnancies?
Yes.
I've seen a picture of you pregnant at 8.5 months, and you can't tell. You knew how to dress? How would you cover it up?
Well, I just didn't show,
You had ponchos, I hear, right?
Yeah.
Did Cesar know that you were pregnant with his 2 children?
I tried to shield him, and this is kind of stupid, huh? But so I never had the conversation with him about that, and I really can't remember whether I ever told him or not, but for some reason I felt that I had to, again, protect the movement,
If you could talk to Cesar Chavez right now, what would you say to him?
How could you?
And When these allegations surfaced publicly, everything changed. Not slowly, but immediately. Events canceled, murals were erased, public honors were stripped. Cities, organizations, leaders, they didn't hesitate.
The United Farm Workers Union says it will cancel celebrations for its founder, Cesar Chavez, amid what they are calling troubling allegations against the iconic labor leader.
On a downtown Santa Ana mural, Cesar Chavez stands among global icons, figures widely recognized for changing history. Just a few miles away, Cesar Chavez Campesino Park honors his legacy. But now, questions are emerging about that legacy. Allegations of inappropriate conduct not independently confirmed by NBC4 are surfacing and drawing a response from the organization he helped build, canceling Cesar Chavez Day events and setting up a confidential process for potential victims. The Cesar Chavez Foundation says it is, quote, shocked and saddened by the allegations they detailed as sexual behavior with women and minors during his time as president of the UFW. They said, quote, the foundation is working with leaders in the farm worker movement to be responsive to these allegations, support the people who may have been harmed by his actions, end quote, adding they will also create a confidential process for potential victims.
I'm standing just outside the Plaza de Cesar Chavez. It is one of a dozen sites in the Bay Area named for the longtime labor leader. And public backlash to Cesar Chavez happened fast. Statues covered in tarps or removed, artwork and murals painted over. Discussions now underway on what to do with schools, parks, and streets that are named after him. And the stage and steps behind me used to be engraved with Cesar Chavez's name, but days after the allegations, workers used paint and cement to cover that name. And even state lawmakers moved quickly to change this holiday. What we have known as Cesar Chavez Day for the past 26 years is now Farm Workers Day.
There wasn't a wave of people rushing to defend Chavez. There wasn't a coordinated effort to discredit victims. There wasn't a campaign to protect the image. Instead, there was a recognition that if these allegations are true, then what was done cannot be excused, no matter how important the person was. And this is where the real shift is happening, because people are done with the idea of untouchable icons. They have been for some time. The focus is moving away from Chavez and toward the people who were always there. Dolores Huerta, a co-founder, a leader in her own right, the Filipino Manongs, workers who helped ignite the movement from day one. Larry Itliong, names that were always part of the story, but never given the spotlight they deserve. Because the truth is, the movement didn't belong to Chavez. It never did, and it doesn't fall apart without him. Now, let's be very clear. This isn't just about one man. This is a warning to politicians, to organizations, to supporters. If you continue to protect individuals with credible allegations, if you stay silent to protect power, if you choose image over accountability, you are part of the problem. And people are watching. We're all watching. Because what we're seeing right now is a shift. A refusal to protect individuals simply because they were once useful. A refusal to ignore harm because it's inconvenient. And a clear message. No one is above accountability. Not activists, not leaders, not icons. And if you stand next to them, knowing what's been said, what's been done, then eventually you'll be answering to. So at the end of the day, this moment isn't about tearing something down. It's about exposing what was hidden and making sure it never gets hidden again, because real justice doesn't protect power. It confronts it. Now, we've seen the Republican Party and the MAGA cult go above and beyond to protect predators, to hide information, and to heavily redact information connected to the Epstein file. So to see my communities coming together to uplift the victims that were affected by Cesar Chavez, to take down his murals, to rename streets, to erase this predator that we once viewed as an icon, is something proud to see, to witness. Because at this point, we're showing the rest of society how you hold individuals accountable and how you can erase their glorification without tearing down a cause. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Cesar Chavez's family. As I'm sure this information coming out cannot an easy thing for them to process as well, but for them to respond in such a manner to where they praise victims while condemning the allegations against their family member is commendable. Now, this is definitely a touchy subject because there's a lot of details coming out that are very sensitive and could be a trigger for individuals. So as always, I really do urge people to talk to someone. If you're going through a time where hearing stories like this or may bring up memories from events in the past, I really do always recommend therapy, and if not therapy, then really talking to somebody that you trust and that can be almost like a relief of pressure for you. But these are my thoughts, Fame family. Let me know yours in the comments below. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And until next time, peace and love.